When you've been in law enforcement as long as I have, you learn to spot fake authority from a mile away. But sometimes, you don't expect to see it right in your own neighborhood. Wearing polo shirts and carrying badges printed on cheap cardstock. And that's exactly where this story begins. With an HOA that thought they could arrest me on my own property. Nancy, our HOA president, had been a thorn in everyone's side for years. She strutted through the neighborhood like she was a sheriff, clipboard in hand, nitpicking everything from lawn length to mailbox paint. But when she turned her sights on me, she made her biggest mistake. One evening, I came home to find a violation. Notice taped to my door. According to Nancy, my truck was illegally parked. Now, I'm no stranger to traffic codes. I've enforced them my entire career, and I knew immediately she was dead wrong. My truck was fully registered, inspected, and parked in compliance with state law, specifically California Vehicle Code 22,507.2, which makes it clear that HOA restrictions can't override municipal parking laws. I crumpled up the letter and tossed it. I wasn't paying a cent, but Nancy wasn't the type to let it go. A few days later, she marched up my driveway with two men flanking her. They weren't cops. They weren't even security guards. They wore matching polos with HOA compliance stitched on the chest. And both carried clipboards and what looked like shiny, laminated badges. Nancy smirked and said, "These are our enforcement officers. They'll explain the situation." One of the men stepped forward, puffing his chest. "Sir, under HOA authority, you're in violation. If you don't comply, we'll have to place you under arrest." I kept my face blank, but inside, I almost laughed. Arrest. HOAs can't arrest anyone. That authority belongs to sworn peace officers under State Penal Code 830.1. I let them finish their little script while my body camera quietly recorded everything. The fake officer waved his badge at me like it meant something, repeating his nonsense about HOA code enforcement. I played dumb. Arrest, huh? You're saying the HOA can do that? Exactly, the other one said, clearly proud of himself. And if you resist, there will be consequences. That was all I needed. The more they talked, the deeper they dug their hole. And I was already planning how to bury them with their own words. The next day, things escalated. I heard the rumble of an engine outside and looked through my blinds. A black SUV with flashing amber lights rolled into my driveway. The same two clowns stepped out, this time with plastic zip ties, dangling from their belts like they were about to make an arrest. They strutted up my driveway like they owned it. One barked, "Sir, this is your last chance. Under HOA authority, you're under arrest." I took a deep breath, steady and calm. Impersonating an officer isn't just a joke. It's a federal crime under Title 18, U.S. Code 912. They weren't bluffing anymore. They were committing a felony right in front of me. I raised my hands, pretending to comply. All right, I said, stepping down from the porch. But the moment the first guy reached for my arm, my training took over. I snatched his wrist, twisted, and dropped him face first into the gravel. He screamed, clutching his knee as it buckled underneath him. The second rushed forward with the zip ties. I sidestepped, hooked his ankle, and sent him sprawling onto the pavement. His shoulder slammed hard, and he let out a howl of pain. Within seconds, both were groaning on the ground, their fake authority crumbling as fast as their bodies. I pulled out my badge, my real one, and held it up for them to see. You boys just impersonated peace officers, trespassed on private property, and attempted unlawful detention. That's multiple felonies. Congratulations. Their bravado vanished instantly. One started crying, begging me not to press charges. The other just stared at the ground, pale as a ghost. But it was too late. I called dispatch. Minutes later, 2 squad cars rolled in, sirens wailing. My officers stormed out, secured the imposters, and hauled them to their feet. The neighborhood came alive. Blinds shifted. Doors cracked open. People who once feared Nancy's power now realized this wasn't HOA business anymore. It was a criminal takedown dot at the station. The 2 imposters cracked wide open. Under questioning, one blurted out the truth. They weren't just freelancing. They'd been hired, and the mastermind, none other than Nancy, the HOA president. I wasn't surprised. Nancy had a personal vendetta. Months earlier, I'd cited her son for reckless driving. She'd held a grudge ever since. Hiring fake officers was her way of teaching me a lesson. But instead, she'd walked herself right into a conspiracy. Case. The charges piled up fast. Impersonating a police officer, conspiracy, attempted unlawful detention, trespassing. Each carried real prison time, and since Nancy had orchestrated it, she was on the hook for all of it. When my officers brought her in, she tried her usual smug act. This is a misunderstanding. I was just protecting the neighborhood. I slid the evidence file across the table. The fake badges, body cam footage, statements from her hired thugs. Her face drained of color. This isn't a misunderstanding, Nancy, I said. It's a felony conspiracy. And you're done. Within 24 hours, Nancy was booked. The HOA board held an emergency meeting, and the community finally found their voice. Neighbors stood up, furious at how far she'd taken things. The vote to remove her was unanimous. Not only was she stripped of her position, but she was also banned from ever holding office again. As for her compliance officers, they'll be limping their way through court hearings before heading to prison, probably wishing they'd never answered Nancy's call. That night, I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee, squad cars still idling down the street. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful for the first time in years. Justice had been served, and the HOA learned the hard way. When you send fake officers after me, you don't just lose your little power trip. You lose everything.